Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be a duo book review on The Fireman and Nosferatu, both by Joe Hill. And I enjoyed both of these books very much, even though they're very different. However, they're both similar in that they're very long books. They have a huge cast of characters, massive world building, and a lot going on. So I'm going to try to describe each of them briefly and then discuss what I liked or didn't like about each of them. And hopefully I can get through this book review without rambling for too long. So I'll start with The Fireman because that's the first one that I read, and I actually listened to the audiobook of this. I'll have all of the information down below. This is a book that opens very simply. It's a woman named Harper, and she's describing the first time she ever saw a man burst into flames. The story is set in kind of a very near future, and at this time a plague has spread out called dragon scale. It's a deadly spore that causes people to erupt into flames. Some people kind of explode earlier than others, and at the time that the book opens, people are still trying to figure out exactly what the disease or the plague is all about. Panic has started to set in because it's very hard to pinpoint what sets off people erupting into flames, and so Harper and her husband Jacob have been discussing what to do. As more panic spreads, her husband Jacob decides that the best thing that they can do is make a pact with each other that as soon as the other person becomes infected, they'll both commit suicide. So when Harper becomes infected early on in the book, Jacob right away is like, okay, well now it's time to complete that pact. But Harper is not on board because number one, she really likes being alive, and number two, she's pregnant. So when her husband, Jacob, tries to kill her, Harper escapes, and she's found by a man named The Fireman, who takes her to this camp of survivors. And that's really where the story takes off. At first, it seems like the camp is this super peaceful place where everybody has kind of worked together to survive. They have been able to control the spore in a way that Harper cannot really understand, but she is willing to do whatever it takes to bring her baby to term. So she stays at the camp where she feels like she can finally be at peace and get through this thing. Well, that would be too easy. It's actually a lot more complicated than that. And what follows in the book is a story that's full of suspense, action, and a fight for survival. A cult has also been developing in the camp over time. Certain things have been setting off the members of the camp, and it's developed into this big groupthink between the members that leads to some really crazy plot twists later on in the story. Things that I wasn't really expecting, and really made it a very kind of terrifying read at times. There's also kind of some fantastical elements in terms of the spore being something that you can control, something that is possibly alive. And so that was really interesting to read about. What I didn't really like is I felt like the book could have been shortened by at least 200 pages. I think it would have made the story a lot tighter overall and made it a little more fast-paced. I can kind of understand too, as I was reading the book, why it ended up being as long as it was, because I think Joe Hill really wanted to demonstrate how a groupthink can develop over time, how a cult can kind of find its footing in a camp of what seems to be normal, sane people, and how the panic of trying to survive in such a strange, violent world can push someone to their limit and make them act irrationally. So you really need time to develop that, and so he did, and so I can kind of give him a pass for that, because overall I felt like this was a very fun, unique story, and it's perfect for anybody that loves like disaster movies or apocalyptic novels or anything like that. Overall, I really enjoyed it, and I knew that as soon as I finished The Fireman, I would try something else by Joe Hill. So I picked up NOS4A2, and this is completely different in almost every single way. The only thing that these two books have that is similar is probably the length, the cast of characters, and the world building, like I mentioned earlier in this video. But NOS4A2 is more horror / fantasy, maybe some magical realism as well. And this is a story of a young girl named Vic McQueen, and she's able to travel a magical bridge while she's on her bicycle. The bridge only appears when she's riding her bicycle, and when she crosses this bridge, she can go to all kinds of different places and find lost things. But there's so much more to this story besides that, of course. There's a very creepy, misogynistic man named Charles Manx, and he is accompanied by another creepy, younger man named Bing Partridge, and together they're trying to save children from horrible homes, and then they're taking them to this magical place called Christmas Land, which exists in Charles' imagination. That's really where Christmas Land is. He takes them on this vintage Rolls Royce, and then they traverse this path to Christmas Land, which is kind of in present day Colorado, but it's not a place that you can get to by any regular road. When Vic has her own child, he is abducted by Charles Manx, and there's a reason why he is choosing to abduct him, and so Vic has no choice but to try to find her son Bruce and rescue him from Charles and Bing. What follows is a sick, twisted, and horrifying story, which can also be kind of heartwarming but horrific. I think that's just the best way that I can describe it. There is a lot of weird shit that is happening in this book. Just like in The Fireman, it would be impossible to really describe the scope of this book in a few words. There's a massive world being described here. The world building is epic. There's some really twisted, memorable characters that, because it's such a long book, Joe Hill's able to really flesh them out and give them kind of a motivation, a backstory, and introduce them in a way where they feel like they've come alive. There's tons of fantasy and magic that's kind of been twisted on its head, and instead of being whimsical, it's completely horrific and violent. And there's just so many things that happen in this book that really make you think how resilient human beings can be. There's also this theme around Christmas, where Christmas is supposed to be such a happy, memorable event for children. I don't think I'll ever look at Christmas the same way again. And I think it's just such a cool thing that he's able to create such a unique story and sell it to you, because if I were to really describe what this book is about in detail, you'd be like, I'm not going to read that. That's not for me. I'm really glad that I went into this book blind, because it made it so much more fun. It was definitely a ride I was on. There were times when I was reading this book where I had to just close the book because I couldn't read on. My only gripe about this book is that some of the characters or the dialogue is just a bit over the top. There are times when women in this book, particularly the main character Vic, they say or think something that I don't think any woman would say or think. You could definitely tell that a man is writing the story, and that kind of took me out of the dialogue sometimes. Sometimes men will say something completely psychotic or vulgar or just over the top, and again, it would take me out of the story, because sometimes less is more. But everything else was just so epic and so grand in scale that I could kind of overlook the dialogue slash, internal monologue of some of these characters and really just enjoy the story. I highly recommend it if you're into horror, or if you're able to read violent, gruesome scenes. If you have a weak stomach, I do not recommend this book. It will really push your boundaries in that sense, but I could definitely read on. I just took a couple of breaks every time that it was just too intense. I cannot wait to read more by Joe Hill, because I absolutely enjoyed both of these reading experiences. They were just so different to what I'm used to, and in the best way. So that's all I'm going to say about these two books. Let me know down in the comments if you've read any of these two and what you thought about them, if you agree or disagree with some of my thoughts, or if you have any that you would like to add. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in my next video.